Good day for the Big 12 and the bowl games. If we want to talk about that for just a second, just sort of a recap, as you've got Oklahoma State winners over Texas A&M as well. And, again, I say this all the time, but I don't know what to make of any of this because, like, Kansas State playing tonight doesn't look like Kansas State has looked all year long, right? I mean, it's not Kansas State. It's a collection of young players that are getting an opportunity after a bunch of players leave. But with that being said, Texas Tech has a win right now. I believe, Tommy, the only loss in a bowl game for the Big 12 is UCF lost their bowl game. Otherwise, we've got some wins here between Texas Tech winning a game, Oklahoma State winning a game, Kansas, of course, winning a game, and West Virginia winning a game. So that's good. That's good for the Big 12.
So they're 5-1. Is that right in bowl games so far? I think 6 teams have played in their bowl games from the Big 12. I think that would make them 5-1.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think they're 5-1 and they're in good shape and doing an awesome job. And we love to see that again, even though I don't think that's some larger discourse on the season because every single one of these games is different based on, North Carolina didn't have Drake May last night. So, what are we doing here? And everybody's dealing with it. I don't want to downplay it either. Everybody's dealing with the same thing.
How about the kid from USC that comes in and starts his first ever college football game and throws 6 touchdown passes, and all of a sudden USC wins the Holiday Bowl against Louisville, who was a top 15 team, by the way.
All of a sudden, Will Howard gets a little more interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that, except I didn't like seeing it because I want to see Will Howard step in there and be the starter. And by the way, I don't think we've had an official announcment on that. I don't. I mean, and that was interesting last night.
That might be why. Might be why there hasn't been an official announcement.
I made me wonder. Okay. The news of the day yesterday, though, is Russell Wilson being benched by the Broncos. They can say whatever they want. This is a move financially so that he doesn't get hurt and guarantee his money next year. Like, Russell Wilson has not been bad this year at all. I mean, he's not been like, he's not an MVP candidate or anything, but what does he have? Like the 7th best passer rating in football. Most recently in a game, he completed 67% of his passes for 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. He's thrown 1 pick in his last 3 games. Like Russell Wilson's been fine. 3,000 yards this year, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Statistically, he's been better than Patrick Mahomes. Yet he gets benched by the Broncos. So, and they, Jarrett, to get a look at Jarrett Stidham, like, shut up. Like, just say, hey, this is a financial move, and we need to make sure we're in the position we want to be in next year. So we're gonna sit Russell Wilson down. Russell Wilson tweets last night that God's got me looking forward to what's next. What a weird situation and what a disaster overall of a decision to trade for him. But it's interesting because, again, like, he wasn't good at the beginning of last year. He kind of got okay late, and then he's been fine this year. It's a weird situation. Like, everyone's like, oh, what a terrible trade. And I'm like, yeah, well, Russell Wilson hasn't really been the total problem there. It's not been like a Russell Wilson exclusive issue the last couple of years in Denver.
Yeah, Sean Payton had a comment, and I don't know exactly the timing of this, if this happened within the last 24 hours or if this was something that he said a while back. But somebody asked him, a reporter asked him about the way that the offense has gone with Russell Wilson. And, basically the reporter was saying, we feel like Russell Wilson is getting more of the blame than he's like deserving of. And Sean Payton makes some comment about, well, I can't get a new offensive line and I can't get brand new receivers and all of that, basically saying, the team that is on the field, especially offensively, is not the team that he wants. We knew that when Sean Payton was hired by the Broncos, right? Like, the disaster last season, to me, the Sean Payton hire never made sense for the Broncos. And I never thought that way that Russell Wilson likes to conduct his business and the way that Sean Payton likes to conduct his would ever work together. I never thought that marriage was going to last. I did think it might go a little bit longer than what it actually has, but we saw Sean Payton blow up on Russell Wilson on the sideline. That's something that I don't think, Wilson is accustomed to. It's not like Pete Carroll ever did that to him in Seattle. This marriage never really seemed like it was going to really be a fruitful one. And now we know that Wilson's getting benched. He's probably going to get cut. I don't think that Wilson is done in the NFL as a starter. I really don't. I mean, I think that there will be a team that will take a chance on him, especially now that he's going to be cut. A team doesn't have to take on his contract. They can negotiate with him. I wonder what that's going to look like and what team is going to be willing to do that. But I do think there's a team in the NFL that will.
Yeah, look, I do too. Just because he hasn't played poorly, he's been fine, and there are plenty of teams that could use him. I don't know that he would go somewhere and be like a backup or something, but he could go somewhere.
Could be a starter.
Well, I do too. I'm just like, maybe that's not the opportunity he even cares about at this point. Like he can be another option for a lot of teams. Not everybody's going to get the quarterback they want in the draft this year. So, for example, like what if the Raiders end up, finishing strong, don't have a high enough pick to get this quarterback? You can't bring in Russell Wilson for a year. He doesn't make you a little bit better. Of course he does. And so, like, the Sean Payton part of this is interesting. I thought when they hired Sean Payton, it told me that they were done with Russell Wilson, because I agree with you. Those two weren't going to work together, most likely. So when they hired him, I'm pretty sure I'd said it publicly, but I know that I thought it, like, they better be willing to give him like 4 or 5 years, because they're going to have to start over from the mess they created with the Russell Wilson trade. Not only
the financial implications,
all the draft picks that they lost to Seattle. So, like, you can't bring Sean Payton in there for an instant fix. Now, I will say they're better this year, I think, probably than most people thought that they would be after watching them last year. And so they still do have some pieces, right? They still have a few good receivers, and I think most people generally like Javonte Williams, and the defense played much better. So Denver's problem now is, okay, now you got to go find a quarterback, though, that's going to give you a better chance than Russell Wilson. And I think that's the part of the Sean Payton hire maybe that we didn't see coming, because you either assumed they were going to be terrible or that Russell Wilson would be. But the problem with the situation is that Russell Wilson's been good, kind of good, like better than average. And so now what do? How is Denver going to go find a quarterback now? Right? Like that's the issue here.
Well, and the issue too is that if the contract for Russell Wilson wasn't so terrible, then they could potentially find a trade partner for Russell Wilson that he could go and provide that team value right away. They can maybe get draft picks back. They can maybe get another quarterback. There are these other options that they could potentially have done, but that financial contract was so bad for Wilson. There's not a team in the league, I don't care how quarterback needy you are, that would be willing to take on that contract that Russell Wilson has. This will go down in NFL history as the worst trade and contract extension of all time.
No, Deshaun Watson doubt about that. Deshaun Watson's trade and contract are way worse. Deshaun Watson sucks. And they gave up way more draft capital.
But the Browns are still in a situation where it hasn't really come to light yet. As of right now, I think that the Russell Wilson one is worse. Now, will ultimately the Deshaun Watson one be as bad or worse? Maybe, but the jury is still out on that. We don't exactly know. Like, the dust hasn't settled with Deshaun Watson yet, fully 100%. Right now, the Russell Wilson trade and contract extension looks terrible because there's nothing the Broncos can do other than just cut him, eat that money, take that cap hit, and they're not going to get any value in return for him at all. They gave away Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, a ton of draft picks to get Russell Wilson for a season and 3 quarters where they didn't win games. They're cutting him loose, and they just have to eat that cost.
So Deshaun Watson's trade was 3 first-round picks, a third, a fifth, and all of that money, essentially. And they've got nothing out of him. And here's why it's way worse to me. They're on the hook for all of the money. Denver's got somewhat of an out here on some of the money, at least. That's why you don't do deals like they did for Deshaun Watson.
Insane. Like
for a little bit.
For sure, but it's still going to hinder them. Like if you're going to go out and, try to sign free agents or whatever to try to make your team better, and you've got that dead money, that cap hit and everything with the Wilson contract cutting him loose, man, I mean, and we knew it at the time when they traded for him and they brought him in, nobody thought that contract was good. everybody was scratching their heads like, what are they doing here? You know, and then you hear all this speculation that really the Broncos wanted Aaron Rodgers, and that was why they hired Nathaniel Hackett, and then Rodgers didn't end up going to Denver, and all of these different things surrounding it. It's been a drama-filled couple of years for Russell Wilson and the Broncos. Now they have to start basically from scratch, and they don't have the resources, I think, to be able to do anything right away to make them even remotely better.
They do have a first-round pick this year. They get, I think, pick 14 or so based right now. They're not going to find their quarterback. That's the problem. They don't have probably the draft capital it will take to trade up. They're going to have to get very lucky and or
Think
go
about,
after.
By the way, if that Russell Wilson contract was not as bad, and if the money, the dead, money and the cap hit and all of that wasn't that bad, and there was actually trade value for Russell Wilson, the first team that I thought about was the Chicago Bears. Thought, Wilson could go and he could be, maybe a right away upgrade from Justin Fields. And then the Bears can move away from Justin Fields. The Broncos can start fresh. Sean Payton can mentor Justin Fields. And then the Bears can draft really well around Russell Wilson. That was the first thing I thought of. Like, you could have a really blockbuster trade with those two teams, but Wilson has no trade value. So that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's a mess. And it's funny that, they're both trades are terrible, and we'll maybe spend some more time, or maybe another time spend some time on which trade was worse. But the fact is, they were probably the two worst, and they were both like bred out of this desperation to do something, and probably because seeing the Rams make it work, and it was like, well, we just got to do what they did, right? It's such a copycat league, and it's like, oh no. That these are like, neither one of them looked good at the time they made it. It was like, that's not going to work. And it didn't, and it hasn't, and it won't in the case of Cleveland. Absolutely not. It's the Flacco Browns now. Not Deshaun Watson's an afterthought. Like, who even cares about that guy at this point? All right, 869-1240 is the IHOP hotline. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, joining us on that IHOP hotline, our pal Chelsea Messenger. Come in, talk a little betting with us here on Sports Daily. We'll do it next. Stay right there.
Your phone call is welcome. 869-1240. Sports Daily on 97.5 and 1240 KFA. The commercials are over.
Yo, I haven't got all day.
869-1240.
Time to get busy.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. We welcome in our pal Chelsea Messenger here to the program. Chelsea, we are so glad to have you again on the line, the host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey Sports Betting Insider. Insider calls are presented by BetMGM. Go check out all the latest lines today on the BetMGM app. Also, be sure to check out the Daily Tip podcast for more of Chelsea Messenger analysis. Just search BetMGM wherever you find your podcast. Chelsea, how are you?
Good morning. Big matchup between some of the listeners' probably school, K-State, and my school, which is NC State, playing in the vaunted Pop-Tarts Bowl, which, if you are wondering, they have decided strawberry is going to be the filling for the edible Pop-Tart at the end of the game. I'm looking forward to it.
That's a good choice. I think this was this is the Tangerine Bowl initially, right? I think that's what this was. Way back in the day. It's a weird one. Maybe you can tell us about your Wolfpack for K-State. It's a new quarterback that everybody's excited about. They've had a ton of players transferring in and out. They're favored by 2.5. I don't know how you go about these games, Chelsea, any of them other than the CFP games, because rosters are in shakeup. You never know motivations. It's so weird trying to look at bowl games and bet them.
Exactly. I think there are a lot of moving parts to these bowl games. It's almost like bowl game bingo, where you have, you've got a quarterback transferring. You've got a head coach who is no longer there. You have, 15 plus guys that are entering the transfer portal. So it makes it really difficult. We can talk about this NC State K-State matchup just for a second, because we are seeing the line move towards NC State. This line opened K-State laying 4.5. Now it's down to 1.5 in some spots. So clearly some money coming in on my Wolfpack. I will say this. They do have the veteran quarterback in Brennan Armstrong, and he's strung together a couple of good games. But still, the ceiling is pretty low for Brennan Armstrong. There's a reason he stuck around and transferred and got benched in the middle of the season for NC State, because sometimes, the talent just isn't there for Brennan Armstrong. I will say the best player on NC State is choosing not to play in this game. Peyton Wilson, their linebacker, is going to play in the NFL. And that's been the calling card for NC State all season long, has been their defense. So when you have basically the quarterback of that defense not playing in this game, I think that is a big hole to fill. I have trouble picking my own school because I don't want to sound like a homer, but that does feel like where the money is going. It's definitely not my favorite play because NC State has let me down many a times, but it does feel like the money is going in that direction because of all the opt-outs we've seen for K-State.
I know that you mentioned a couple minutes ago about how difficult it is to bet bowl games, but so far early on in bowl season, are you seeing any kind of trends? Does it look like games are typically hitting the over, or is there really no trend at all that we've seen thus far?
Yeah, no trends. Every time you think you have something figured out, the opposite will happen. Because last night I was thinking to myself, okay, if rain is in the forecast, do you really want to trust a double-digit favorite? But Virginia Tech still covered last night in pouring rain in that game, because we have a similar situation today with SMU, who has been cruising along this season, coming in hot. They might be a little disappointed that they're not playing in a New Year's Six Bowl, but still 10.5-point favorites against Boston College. Wow, this line's gone all the way up to 12.5. So clearly people are not afraid to back SMU in this spot. I think the main thing is people love to talk about their offense and how prolific this team is at putting up points, but their defense, year over year, one of the best improvements we have seen by a defense in all of college football. So Boston College, not an especially strong team, despite coming out of the ACC. I think I would take SMU, but the big sabotage factor is it is supposed to be played in pouring rain. So I think that's the problem for me in a lot of these games this weekend for the slate. You will like a play, but there is one big landmine that stands in your way. And looking at the Oklahoma game, they have a stud blue chip prospect starting at quarterback that makes me not want to fade Oklahoma, even though kind of like Arizona in that one. 10-2 against the spread so far this season. Under the radar, one of the better teams to bet on college football. But like I said, bowl season has been very tough.
It's been tough. There are games, though, I think that you can lock in on, and those are the CFP games. We know players are playing there. You've got Michigan right now sitting as a 1.5-point favorite. You've got Texas sitting as a 4-point favorite. We won't talk to you again before those games are played on New Year's Day. What are we thinking about the games that actually matter in a very clear way, Chelsea?
I think it's a little fishy that the Alabama and Michigan line has not moved, because we do see a majority of the money come in on Alabama, and doesn't it feel like that's the narrative right now? Is Alabama super hot? You don't want to go against Nick Saban in a bowl game, but this line hasn't moved at all, despite, I believe, 60% of the money on Alabama right now. So that one I'm a little nervous about betting on, but I do think I like the points in Washington. Taking Washington plus 4.5 against Texas, I still think there's a chance that Texas wins, but maybe does not cover. But I think that Texas, their strength is stopping the run. And we saw that against Oklahoma State. But Washington, we know, has a very talented passing attack. Of course, led by Michael Penix Jr., Heisman candidate, and several NFL caliber wide receivers. I think it's going to be a real problem for Texas in that secondary, especially in the middle of the field. That's when they have been the most vulnerable. So I'll take the points in Washington in that one. Not so sure about Alabama and Michigan.
Looking ahead to a national championship game, Chelsea, from a betting perspective, is there a matchup that you think is better than the others potentially as far as betting is concerned? Are we looking at, potentially Michigan and Texas or Alabama and Washington? Is there one that you're locked into that from a betting perspective, you're like, man, I really want to see that because I think that there could be a good angle there?
I do think Texas could match up particularly well against Alabama or Michigan. Obviously, we have already seen Texas match up with Alabama, although that was much earlier in the season. Jalen Milroe still had some progressing to do. So I do think I kind of want Texas to advance, because I think maybe they have a better shot at defeating whoever wins out of Alabama and Michigan. But what a story Washington's been. But we have seen how swiftly good stories can come to an end. Almost feels like Washington is the TCU of last season. So we'll see. I just hope for a good game in the national championship. And I do think Texas probably brings the best opportunity for that.
All right, Chelsea, let's talk a little NFL. It is, we're kind of getting down to the nitty gritty here. Thursday night football tonight, Jets, Browns, the Flaccos taking on, I don't know who's going to start for the Jets. I think Simeon again. So it's, you've got backup quarterbacks in, but Flacco's playing anything other than a backup quarterback. They're at home, 7.5 points. Jets, Browns actually was a little bit of intrigue last night, despite no Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson, which is what I'm sure Amazon was counting on at the beginning of the year, but this one shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah, and this is a meaningful game for Cleveland, because when and they're in, they win this game, they are in the postseason. So clearly a big-time home game for Cleveland. And this has been where they have been really good, at home and as favorites. This year at home, straight up 7-1, and against the spread when playing at home. And in their last 5 games as favorites, 5-0 straight up and against the number. So when Cleveland is favored, it's usually a pretty solid bet. And some of these spreads have been pretty big in these situations that I am talking about. 7.5 makes me a little nervous in a game that has a total of 34.5 points. Clearly, points are going to be at a premium. And here's the caution flag that I would throw at people saying, oh, Joe Flacco and his passing offense has been, spot on, spectacular. This is the number one most bet on prop tonight. Joe Flacco over his passing yards, 233.5. Something you need to realize is some of those matchups in which he's thrown over 300 yards passing have been some of the weakest secondaries in the NFL. Like going into the Texans game last week, the Texans were giving up the 4th most passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. Not the same deal when facing the New York Jets. The New York Jets are the number one hardest matchup when it comes to fantasy, when it comes to yards for opposing quarterbacks. So I know it's been a great story for Joe Flacco so far, but don't be shocked, if the output is a little bit less tonight against this Jets team that has guys like Sauce Gardner, who's been great when guarding number one receiver. So I'm a little torn on it, but I would lean towards Cleveland laying the 7 or the 7.5.
It's crazy when you look at the points in this game. I mean, it looks like the over-under is an Iowa Hawkeyes game. I mean, it's 34 for tonight. And I know that everything tells me to bet the under with the way that Cleveland's defense plays and Trevor Siemian starting for the Jets. And then everything that you just mentioned about the Jets secondary taking on Joe Flacco, the fact that it's a primetime game and the way that the unders, typically go with those. Is there anything that would talk you out of going with the under at 34? I mean, that point total is very, very low. I wouldn't think that it'd be that difficult to get more than 34 points, but what do you think about that?
I think the number's too low because there is a price on everything. Yes, the handicap is these are two of the best defenses in the league, but at certain points, you look at the number and say, okay, I don't want to hold my nose and bet an under here because both of these offenses do have some good pieces. Now, the Jets offense, I'm pretty worried about. Trevor Siemian does not scare me going against this Cleveland Browns defense, but still, they've got some pieces. Breece Hall, we know, can do electric things with the ball. I do kind of like his receiving prop tonight. And Garrett Wilson, defending Rookie of the Year on the offensive side of the ball. But this number is just too low for me. So I don't think I will be playing a total here. I think I'm only looking at possibly Cleveland minus 7.5 and Breece Hall over his receptions prop, 4.5. That's plus money. It's certainly not a guarantee because this Browns defense is really good, but he has been heavily involved in the receiving game. Last week, he had 16 targets. 16. That's like a receiver. He had 96 receiving yards. He has hit over 4.5 receptions in 5 of his last 6 games. That's plus 120 tonight. I think I like that if you're looking for a plus money play.
Yeah, I see another one here, Chelsea. Rushing and receiving yards combined, Breece Hall to go over 100 right now at BetMGM is plus 175. I kind of like that. That seems like good money on Breece the Beast. Breece has been hard, though, because when they play bad defense, here's the reation, by the way, Chelsea, I don't know if you knew this. We may have talked about this before. Breece is from Wichita, so he's like a homegrown guy. But so when they play bad defenses, it seems like they sort of go away from him a little bit. Do you think, can we see anything from last week where maybe they finally open their eyes? And I know it's Nathaniel Hackett who has a bad history of this, but he is their offense. No matter what the situation is, get him the ball.
I think so too, but you got to be careful on the rushing and receiving because I do think it's a really tough matchup against the run. And that's why I went over receptions instead of receiving yards, just because I think they will feed him the ball. I just don't know how effective he is going to be against what looks to be a very tough, matchup on paper against this defense. And especially if you think that the game script is going to be negative, if you think the Jets are going to be losing this game, I'm not sure how effective he will be in the run game if he's not getting 20 carries. Because last game was against the Commanders, one of the worst defenses in the league.
Right.
I think that's a little different.
Man, I'm really excited for the Saturday night primetime game, the Cowboys and the Lions. Taking a look at the percentage from the public right now, the majority of people have the Cowboys on the money line, but the Lions to cover the spread. It's a 5.5 right now from what I can tell. What do you think about this game? The Cowboys, of course, fell to the Dolphins a week ago. Is this a game that they should bounce back on, or can the Lions continue on with what they've been doing?
I do think that the Cowboys win because what has been the narrative for the Cowboys all season long? They're amazing at home, 7-0 at home this season. But do the Lions look like a team that, needs 6 points? I think the number's a little too high for me to stomach here. So there's a good chance that Dallas rolls in this one and absolutely, piles up the yardage here because that's what they do at home. But still, I don't think I'm willing to put the Lions in that position. Like you look at teams who, maybe deserve to be getting 6 points. I don't think the Lions are really in that category for me. So I would lean towards the Cowboys, but it would make me nervous.
All right. As we look also around the NFL, Chelsea, we'll get to the Chiefs specifically in just a minute, but what else should we be looking at this Sunday?
Well, I wanted to ask you about Travis Kelce because he is in an absolute smash spot for tight ends. The Bengals are allowing the most receiving yards to opposing tight ends, but is Travis Kelce broken? I think that's the question people want to know.
No, he is not.
Right. Back-to-back performances of 40 receiving yards. So you get almost a comically low number for somebody who used to be posted in the 80s routinely, 62.5 receiving yards. That's the number for Travis Kelce this weekend against the easiest matchup for opposing tight ends. The Chiefs are in a desperate spot. And wouldn't you think that Patrick Mahomes will still feed him the ball? He's had at least 7 targets in back-to-back games, so it's not like the targets aren't there. So I think if there were anything to play in that Chiefs game, it would be that. And to, matchup-wise, that's one of the best matchups of the entire slate.
He's mad too, Chelsea, which matters, don't you think, Tommy? Kelce's mad. He's like, and I know that hasn't played out well for him. So far, like him being frustrated hasn't been a good thing. But at some point, they're going to the game is coming where he just goes off, I think.
Yeah, and I think that leads into a really good question about the Chiefs in general from a betting perspective. How do you handicap a team that makes so many self-inflicted mistakes? And so like looking at the game this weekend, I mean, they're 7-point favorites, but they have, basically shot themselves in the foot. And the mistakes they made against the Raiders a week ago on Christmas Day, Chelsea, that led to 14 points for the Raiders. And that was on the Chiefs making those mistakes. So how do you handicap a team like that when they are so prone to shooting themselves in the foot?
I think the answer on what the Chiefs really are is somewhere in between, because I don't think they're as bad as what we saw against the Raiders. Clearly, they're not going to hand the ball over that many times. But still, they were double-digit favorites in that game. They didn't even come close to covering. So at some point, you have to look in the mirror and say, okay, this is what this team is. Because early on the season, I think we all said, okay, well, eventually the Chiefs are going to Chiefs. They're going to be back to their winning ways, right? At this point, I just feel like the line is too high. Against the spread, they have not been good at covering. And it's not been like in years past, because we've had really good Chiefs teams that just didn't cover because the lines were too high. But the Chiefs are losing some of these games outright. Right now, sitting at 4-4 against the spread at home. So you're looking at a touchdown spread against Cincinnati, a team that I think can play from behind. Like, even if the Chiefs are winning, Cincinnati has a pretty solid passing attack that the backdoor feels like it would be wide open for Cincinnati here. So I think what you do with a team like Kansas City, you don't play them. You either play the other side or you don't play them at all.
What else is your favorite bets? Are your favorite bets this weekend in the NFL, Chelsea?
This one seems kind of square, but I think I like it. I'm going to go over 47 between the Ravens and the Dolphins. These are the two fastest teams in the NFL. I think we all knew that about the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle expected to play in this one, I believe. Last check, I know he's kind of banged up. But look at the Ravens. I don't know if you've been watching them play, but the way that some of their receivers move, boy, are they fast as well. And, of course, I haven't even talked about Lamar Jackson. So I think both these teams will be scoring some points, because even against good defenses, which the Ravens are one of the best defenses in the NFL, but sometimes you see these players, they're cheat codes. Doesn't seem to matter the matchup, who's guarding them, whatever, that they can score points. So I'll take the over in the Ravens and the Dolphins.
All right, Chelsea. We appreciate it. Good luck this weekend with all the bets. We'll get there. It's almost playoff time in the NFL. The next time we talk, we'll have a national championship to be talking about. This is a big-time weekend of football into New Year's Day. We appreciate your insight as always, and enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was the host of the Daily Tip and Odyssey Sports Betting Insider, Chelsea Messenger. Insider Calls presented by BetMGM. Go check out all the latest lines today on the BetMGM app. All right. We're going to come back here. We'll wrap up this hour. We'll get into the Pop-Tarts Bowl with our K-State insider, Tim Fitzgerald, top of the next hour. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. Sports Daily coming right back.
97.5 and 1240 KFH.
This holiday season, all your wishes are coming true on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Lutz, Lutz, and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL and KFA. 21 plus and present in Kansas. First online real money wager only. $5 pregame moneyline wager required. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued is not withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino LLC. Gambling problem? Getting help is your best bet. Call 1-800-522-4700 or visit ksgamblinghelp.com.
Warmest wishes for a joyous holiday season and a happy new year from your friends at Odyssey and Devon James Injury Lawyers.
I'm Bob Burke, founder and chairman of Burke America Parts Group, a family of brands that includes RepairClinic.com, an appliance and HVAC parts solution company that's grown into an international brand. Before AmericanEagle.com, we partially launched a new technology platform developed by another firm. American Eagle helped take our technology to a whole new level with digital marketing, software development, and business insights into our key markets, appliances, HVAC, and outdoor power equipment, and did so both on time and on budget. AmericanEagle.com has the resources, experience, and talent needed to produce solutions. Our new technology platform, developed by AmericanEagle.com, has produced tremendous results with higher traffic, conversion, engagement, and online revenue. If you have any home repairs you need to take care of, check us out at RepairClinic.com. If you need a world-class website or technology project, then I would highly recommend AmericanEagle.com.
Call AmericanEagle.com at 773-NETWORK. That's AmericanEagle.com, 773-NETWORK.
Join us at Odyssey as we all do our one thing. Together millions of things for our planet. If you get a new tablet or cell phone this year, recycle your old one, either by donation or an e-waste program. When we each share our one thing, it becomes a million things for our planet. What's your one thing?
Come and enjoy a free birthday boil at Hook and Reel. Valid only with minimum of a 2-entree purchase, proof of ID, and also valid 3 days before and 3 days after birthday. Located in Town East Parking Lot, East Kellogg.
Attention taxpayers. If you or your business owe the IRS back taxes or have years of unfiled tax returns, the IRS has green-lighted billions of dollars in tax relief to those facing financial hardship through its tax relief initiatives. If you have a delinquent tax problem and possibly facing wage garnishment, liens, levies, audits, or already in a payment plan, you may now qualify for significant relief. Qualifying and enrolling in this program could stop all collections, settle your tax problem, and may even reduce what you owe by up to 99%. Call the hotline at Tax Help USA to see if you qualify by dialing 800-823-0015. If you or your business owe at least $10,000 in back taxes to the IRS or state, you can now get the help that you need during these hard economic times. Call Tax Help USA to get your free tax assessment to see what you qualify for by dialing 800-823-0015. 800-823-0015. That's 800-823-0015.
Oh, okay, take it easy. We're going on the air.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Sports Daily here. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. We're wrapping up hour number one as we get ready for the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And it's going to be a good one, I think. You know, it won't be probably what we expected roster-wise, but I think, Tommy, like in fairness, both teams are sort of dealing with it a little bit. Chelsea talked about it. That's awesome. I forget that she's an NC State grad, and that's her team. It's good to hear they're kind of in that same mode of, like, what are we doing here? What are we doing with our roster? One of their best players is out, and here's K-State, you know, rolling in the same capacity. You almost have to just throw. I think I'll just bet K-State -2.5, just because we'll be rooting so hard for Avery Johnson. But otherwise, like, I just don't know.
It's such a weird dynamic, and it's been this way for a while, and especially with the transfer portal and all of that. Man, like, it's just been so weird with bowl games. Knowing that on the one hand, you never know what a team's composition and makeup is going to look like, but then that's on the one hand. And so you can have, you know, bad performances from teams that look nothing like they did during the regular season. But then on the flip side, you have performances like the guy from USC last night that we've never seen before, 6 touchdowns. And it's crazy, yeah. Right? And we celebrate it, and it's fun to watch, and it's exciting and all of that. So it's a double-edged sword between teams like you have no idea sometimes what they're going to look like, but then you find diamonds in the rough occasionally too, and that's the wildness of bowl season.
So we get that with the two teams that we follow here in Kansas and Kansas State. Two very different reasons potentially to be excited. On one hand, you have KU who's returning everybody, right? They get an entire roster back here. And then you've got, and I get granted, basically. And then you get K-State. And it's like, okay, we've got all of these new players. But again, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. These are new players that, like, almost every circumstance, we're really excited to have, right? They're new players that were highly touted recruits. They're new players in some cases, like Avery Johnson, that people were clamoring for to be the starter this year anyway. So I don't want to totally dismiss it and say, oh, well, K-State, they're dismissing all their players. They shouldn't do whatever, XYZ. No, they probably should still. And it does provide. I mean, if you can just imagine for a second, K-State coming out tonight and playing really well, then the buzz will be just as high in Manhattan this year as it is in Lawrence currently. That's out there. I think, Tommy, it's more about what Connor Riley does and what does K-State do to replace Colin Klein long-term? And we'll get the latest from Fitz on this. I don't know what the expectation is there, but his role tonight is probably just as big as, anything that's going to happen on the field that we don't see, is how he handles that.
It's interesting, the different parallels between, and we talked about it yesterday, where KU is right now and where K-State is right now. And the one thing that they do have in common is they lost their offensive coordinators. Both of them did. And that was a question going into KU's bowl game. What will that offense look like without Andy Kotelnicki? And then the question, I think, for K-State is, what does that offense look like without Colin Klein? Then you take it a step further, and you've got a young quarterback that he is not only the quarterback of the future, but he's now the quarterback of the present for the Wildcats with a new offensive coordinator. I mentioned it yesterday. I think that this game for Kansas State, if there's a good showing for them today against NC State, regardless of the final score, but if there are good plays, good drives, good performances, all of that, it's going to make it that much more exciting to look ahead to the fall with Avery Johnson. Not that if they have a bad showing, all of a sudden the air is let out of the balloon, but it makes it that much more easier to be able to look ahead and say, all right, well, this team is going to be exciting to watch next fall with Avery Johnson under center.
And who's going to call the plays next year, right? I think so. Just remember back to how Colin Klein got the job in the first place. Colin Klein got the job when I'm not sure the expectation was for him to get the job. And then they performed really well in a bowl game and he got the full-time gig. Connor Riley's in the exact same situation. He's been with Kleinman for a lot longer than Klein had been at that point. And remember, the K-State offense was struggling, right, when Klein took over. That's not the case now. But the continuity, I think, matters to some degree. The fact that you've had somebody who's in some capacity been working with Avery Johnson all year anyway matters. But in a best-case scenario for K-State fans, Connor Riley will be the offensive coordinator next year, and that's because they looked really good tonight in this game. And then you can just continue the momentum that's already been built. I think that what happens with offensive coordinator is as interesting as anything next year, because you have to continue that momentum that Klein started. The loss of Klein will be immense. It will be big, unless somebody else on the staff can continue the momentum, which is totally within the realm of possibilities, right? Yeah. I don't know if they'll be able to recruit at the same level without Colin Klein, but maybe they can still coach at the same level. You know what I mean? Klein was such a big part of what they do for two reasons, is coaching and is recruiting. They've got to at least be able to get the coaching part to continue.
And the development with the quarterback position.
Sure.
That's big also. And Colin Klein brought that experience of playing under center in Manhattan for a number of years and then worked with developing those quarterbacks. The good thing, though, is that you also have Chris Kleiman as the head coach, who has a history of developing quarterbacks. So it was a 1-2 punch with both of them. You've lost one of those guys, but at least you still have Kleiman as the head coach, who has a background in that sort of things. So I think that's a huge reason why Avery Johnson did stick around.
Have you ever been as excited to watch a college football player for the first time? And it's not the first time we're seeing Avery Johnson. I hate even saying that because it's not the case. You know what I mean, though. Like, I can't remember a sort of debut or whatever you want to call this that has me as excited just to see. And I know it's because he's local and we've watched him for so long.
Right.
But, man, it's going to be – I hope this works out and he's as big a star as we all think he might be. It's just going to be so fun.
I think we may be looking at, potentially a coming out party for Avery Johnson. It's a great way.
He had one.
Nationally.
He had one. Coming out party as a
national
passer.
level.
Right. Yep.
Yeah,
as a passer. Yeah. Because everyone thinks he's just this great athlete that runs around.
Right.
And we all know, I mean, I tell people this. He's one of the more gifted throwers of the football at the prep level. He's not one of. He is the most gifted thrower of the football I've ever seen at the prep level, covering high school football for 20 years now. He's got the best arm I've ever seen. It's just different when he throws the ball. So I can't wait to see that, and hopefully that translate tonight. That game coming up, 4:45 kick. You'll hear it on KFH. We'll talk more about it with our K-State insider, Tim Fitzgerald, on the other side here. Stick with us. Albracht, Castor, Sports Daily, coming right back.
Sports Later News. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody, to hour number 2 of Sports Daily. It's Albracht and Castor, Max Power producing, and we are joined now by our buddy Tim Fitzgerald, GoPowerCat.com, at Life of Fitz on social media. Fitz, it's a game day, a little different for you, I know, but still one to be excited about. How are you this morning?
I'm good. To be honest, I'm so focused on it being game day, I didn't know who was calling me at 10 o'clock on game day. But it's not regular game day, it's Thursday. I got an appointment with you guys.
Yeah, and a good appointment. Look, I don't know where your head's at on this game. I think I don't know what to expect out of the outcome. NC State is missing a bunch of players, just like K-State is missing a bunch of players. The obvious spotlight will be on Avery Johnson. I have kind of started to think that Connor Riley may be the more important spotlight because he's sort of coaching for a job here. Like, when we talk about expectations for a Pop-Tarts Bowl, how do you even set them?
Yeah, it's kind of wild how much the transfer portal and more guys sitting out for the draft have changed the bowl picture. I was commenting on an NC State podcast yesterday. I have no idea how big it sets the odds for these things. I mean, how do you wrap your mind around the changes and how they'll actually impact the team? And, we saw it last night with the Holiday Bowl in which USC, just absolutely destroyed, their opponent with backup quarterback. Nobody expected to play that well. So it's just hard to project. But I think in light of how the season ended with that miserable performance in the snow against Iowa State, fans are excited to have one more with the youth movement underway for Kansas State football. We knew it was coming next year, but this is like a bonus preview of all that.
Yeah, how important, Fitz, is continuity in your mind? The continuity from the success that the team that we were used to watching all season overall had this year versus what the future is. And I know that they don't have Colin Klein, obviously, anymore, but Chris Kleiman is still the head coach. And even with the youth movement, there's a certain way that he likes to do things. So how important do you think it is for them to show that there is that continuity between what they did this year and then what it is going to look like in the future?
That's an important part of Chris Kleiman's program is the old guys handed down, this kind of thought to the young guys. And I think that's been done. I know this. Anyone that watched Avery play or got to know him in the Wichita area, he's a one of a kind. And I don't mean that as a player. I mean as a person. This kid is wildly mature beyond his years. He's a calm, thought process type of guy. And I think that has reflected well in the locker room. And I think maybe the most remarkable thing to come out of this whole bowl process is we've got a true freshman at Kansas State who's emerged as a leader of the team going into a bowl game. Now, I don't know what you guys are like as true freshmen in college, but I was drunk too much to lead anyone to anywhere other than Aggieville. So I'm just really impressed at how Avery Johnson's handled this and seems to be transitioning right into keeping everything going at Kansas State.
Yeah, I'm with you, Fitz. And it's not just like the pressure of now being the starter, or like all the attention that has been around him there since he was even in the running. Like it's been all about Avery Johnson in Manhattan. What are we looking at? Probably about 2 years now since he ultimately made the decision to watching everything he did in his final year of high school, to all the Elite 11 quarterback camps, to building even more buzz, to, getting there as a freshman, people wanting him to be the starter, him re-announcing he's going to be there despite calling, like all of this. It's not just like something that has now sprung on him as he's about to officially take the reins. It's been going on for 2 years with this kid.
Yeah, it's crazy. How the process plays out. And the presence of Avery Johnson in that locker room was apparent from early on. And I just want to point out that the team and the coaches believe in this guy so much. A fifth-year senior quarterback with one more year of eligibility left. And, he's looking at major programs or possibly the NFL as his choice, but he knew he wasn't going to be the starter in Manhattan next season. Everyone knew that because the talent is undeniable, and you need to get to that talent and start developing it to its, furthest extent as soon as possible. And I think Chris Kleiman now realizes that process should have started this year and playing him more in those late games, because I think they mismanaged his eligibility horribly. But, I don't know. You can't unwind the clock, but boy, I don't blame Case Ayers for being frustrated how Colin Klein managed this young man's season, because I think he could have helped the team at some points of this season.
What do the skill position players look like around Avery for today? I mean, I know that we know Trayshawn Ward is out of the program. Ben Sinnott is going to the draft, all of that. So what do you expect as far as the tools that Johnson will have to work with today?
Well, first thing, let's say that he's got the veteran offensive line in front of him. So that would be a bigger concern if those guys had left, to be really blunt, because I don't think they're ready along the line to play a bowl game. Now, the skill positions, I do think they're ready. We'll see a whole bunch of DJ Giddens, probably more than usual, but they'll mix some Joe Jackson in there, who's an electric true freshman. We've already seen Jace Brown at receiver and the impact he had. But look for Trey Spivey, another true freshman, to step up there. You got Garrett Oakley at tight end to go with Swanson. But I think Oakley is seen as the Ben Sinnott successor in terms of being the playmaking tight end. And we saw that unveil itself later in the season. So in terms of the skill positions, they're going to be young. Will they make some mistakes? Yeah, but guys, I'm really excited to see Avery Johnson throw into the guys he probably threw a lot to in practice, including Keegan Johnson, while he was, trying to work his way back up through being injured this season into the regular rotation. So they're young at receiver, but boy, they're going to be more dynamic, I think, in this game than they have in most of the season.
You'll know this better than us, Fitz. Go powercat.com, publisher at Life of Fitz on social media. So Avery got all the attention of the local guys, but it was sort of a class of local guys for us. Wesley Fair, Will Ancio, a part of that class. Any expectations for those two other locals here from the Wichita area tonight?
I think Wesley, I'm not sure on Will Ancio, to be honest. I haven't really heard him mentioned at this point, which doesn't mean anything. It might just mean he's a little bit further behind the curve in terms of development. But, I watched that kid on film. I love him. But I think Wesley Fair is going to be really good. Unfortunately for Wesley Fair, he has two guys in his class named Colby McAllister and Jack Fabris who are going to play significant minutes in this game because they have really erupted early in the process. In fact, the coaches love Jack Fabris so much, they made the decision they should have made with Avery. Let's play him 4 and shut him down. Maybe they couldn't afford to do that with Avery in case there's an injury, but they did shut Jack Fabris down, and now the NCAA allows anyone to play in this game without it impacting their eligibility as long as they're eligible to play this season. So it's going to be interesting. Jack Fabris, according to the depth chart, is going to step in at Kobe Savage's position, and I think the coaches are really excited about what he brings to the table.
Defensively, of course, we know all of the changes and Kobe Savage out and just all of the other changes that have happened on that with that unit. Is this something that we should maybe temper our expectations a little bit defensively for this particular game, but know that, next year, more than likely defensively, the team will be kind of back where we expect them to be? Or do you think that transition from some of these guys like Kobe Savage into the next man up mentality can take place right away? They've had enough prep time over the last few weeks. What do you kind of think that we should be, the outlook should be, I guess, for the game today on the defensive side of the ball?
I expect mistakes. But let's be honest, we've seen that from the back end of this defense all season long. And one of the guys that made a big part of those mistakes, Will Lee, is gone. They'll probably go with their their two other corners and maybe play a young guy. But I expect mistakes, and I think that the coaches expect that. That's part of the learning process, and that's part of the unknown going into this game that makes it kind of interesting. How good will these guys be? Will they be just fumbling and stumbling all over the place and in the wrong position constantly? And we see kind of a replay of maybe Missouri or one of those games when the defense wasn't very good. But I think we're going to see this revolution to these young guys really benefit this defense going forward. I want to back up to the start of the season when Joe Klanderman said he has 8, 9, maybe 10 true freshmen that he would trust on the field this season. That's how good the defensive class was that are true freshmen. There are a bunch of guys. I think if this is, game plays out the way they want to, they're going to sample them throughout the game and see what they got. I mean, they're going to have defensive ends step in for Nate Matlack, and that will be a true freshman. So it's just very entertaining.
Get out your crystal ball for me, Fitz. Is Connor Riley the right man for the job? Is he going to get this job, you think?
I don't know. And here's the thing. For me, it doesn't, unless he's just horrific at calling plays and it's obvious, by halftime, oh boy. I think Connor being in the press box today instead of on the field with his dudes is a big storyline, because I don't think he's going to like it up there. I think he's going to go crazy up there. And I think he's going to realize, I want to have input on play calling. I certainly want to be part of the coordinator title at Kansas State, but I also want to be on the field with my guys. I know some offensive coordinators call plays on the field. I don't think it's wise, but I also think that this impacts who they hire for quarterback coach. Are you just hiring a quarterback coach because Connor Riley's the offensive coordinator? Or are you hiring a quarterback coach who's also been an OC and called plays so that he can be in the booth like Colin Klein was? It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out today. But Connor Riley has been waiting for this moment. He's called plays in the past, early in his career, but this is a pretty big stage.
Okay, Fitz, when the dust settles with the game tonight, final score, regardless of what ends up happening, how important is this bowl game, do you think, for this program? It's the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It's, changed the name 40,000 different times. Regardless if they win or lose, where does this rank, I guess, from a scale of like 1 to 10 on an importance level for the program as the program moves forward? Is this something that Chris Kleiman has lost sleep over the last couple weeks or so in getting ready for it? Or is it just kind of a, I don't want to say mediocre, but kind of middle of the road bowl game, bowl experience? You cross it off the list and you move on to next year.
That's a good one, Tommy. I'd probably put a 6 on it. And that's up a couple points just based on where how the young guys go. Either way, it's going to be a benefit to the team to get these guys against a Power 5 opponent, a bowl opponent that's looking for their 10th win. They're going to be motivated. It's going to be great exposure for all these young guys to play at that level throughout an entire contest, not just a few games or a few snaps. And that's Avery included. So it's going to put them ahead of the curve for next year. But there's a possibility that they play well and they win and they get a bunch of momentum out of this too, a bunch of feel good. And if that happens, I think it elevates the importance of what the bowl game was. But overall, you're right. It's the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It is the second bowl in the pecking order for the conference. So, it has been a pretty decent bowl to go to. But this new environment of bowl games, it just has changed the value of games so much, because really they just mean, I don't want to say less, but something different when you've got opt-outs, different quarterbacks, and the lineups change. It just changes the whole texture of what the games are about.
It does, but I mean, Fitz, it like, what did it mean before, right? Like, this means a ton for different people in a different way for K-State, but like, the bowl game outcome has never meant a ton for me as an observer, but man, for the future of this program, don't you think that it's pretty easy to make a case that this game being played the way it will be played this year versus traditionally, when you would have had a bunch of seniors and their swan song, but the way this will be played will be far more impactful to the future of this program, because now these guys have a chance to get out there one time and work on, what they learned from this game for an off season.
Yeah, it's changed the meaning, but I go back to the '93 Copper Bowl and what a transformational moment in Kansas State football that event was. They'd had a great season, and then 40,000 K-State fans show up in Tucson for the game. The Holiday Bowls in those early years were so important to Kansas State. And granted, the Holiday Bowls dropped down the bowl pecking order a little bit, but they had a great matchup last night. You go to the Cotton Bowl with Tennessee, or that '95 Holiday Bowl has a lot of interesting things to it, because Matt Miller got injured in that game, and Brian Cavanaugh was thrown in at quarterback. We didn't really know what Cav was going to be about, and he's now in the Holiday Bowl Hall of Fame. So, maybe that's, a little bit precursor of what's happening here. But bowl games used to really help you climb that ladder to get to where you wanted to go, and not just the next season, but in the future. In case they climbed that ladder perfectly through the bowl ranks. They tripped a little bit along the way, but they had some bowl games that really built off of, and bowl games haven't felt that way. This one feels that way, like it could really mean something for next season.
I think so too. I think it's going to matter. I think we're going to look back at this one way or the other, and it will benefit the program moving forward. Final thing from me: KU fans are riding high right now, loving what the future could bring next year. Understanding that they could absolutely be in the mix for a Big 12 title, be in the mix for a CFP appearance if that's the case. You think K-State at about 9:00 tonight will be feeling the same way?
That's a great question. Will they win? I don't know. I think K-State's going to feel that way, win or lose. It may not be tonight. They might, be sipping on a cold one if they lose and not worry about next year. But I think they'll take away from this game any positives, and just the experience will help. But I'm going to be blunt here. I mean, K-State's playing a Power 5 program looking for 10 wins. This is a significant challenge for any team. And UNLV was a really good football team, but it's, the Mountain West was down this year.
Right.
I think there's some overvaluing of beating UNLV in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. But I do think KU is going to be really good next year. There's no doubt in my mind. And I've said it over and over. I'm a Lance Leipold believer. I think he's the right guy at the right time, at the right place. And we'll see where that carries Kansas. And advantage to them being right when he's climbing up that ladder, you got a 12-team playoff. You had Bill Snyder with teams in the top 4 in the country for, a number of years, at least 2 or 3 that never had access to a playoff or could quite close the gap on the championship game like '98. So the opportunity's there. And this is what I've been saying about the 12-team playoff. This is what changes college football. Is now if a Kansas or Kansas State or Oklahoma State accesses that playoff, 3 out of 5 years, 2 out of 3 years, it starts to change the perception of your program wildly, as opposed to going to the Cotton Bowl and then maybe going to, the Pop-Tarts Bowl, or whatever it is. Now if you're in that playoff, you kind of join the club that's been exclusive before, and before that 2 teams. And I think that's going to be a great opportunity for Brett Yormark's Big 12 to build some brand, including Kansas and Kansas State in the football world, by accessing that playoff.
We're going to love it. I'm telling you, it'll take maybe 1 year for us to look back and say, what in the hell have we been doing with college football before this? Because this is incredible. It will make the seasons so much better all over the country. And I don't care if a team makes it and gets beat by 60 in the first round. Who cares?
Nope.
Getting in
Nope. I'm with you.
means something. And it will mean something throughout the regular season. All right, Fitz, what do you guys have for some game day coverage at GoPowerCat.com?
Oh my gosh, we're so backed up on coverage because of the holiday, and I made sure guys had a couple days off in there. But we've got our pregame podcast up. We've got the Friday walkthrough up. We've got my 5 keys to victory that's going up here, or maybe it went up already. A lot of VIP stuff. We're at 60% off through the bowl game at least, and for VIP subscriptions. And I just go to look at it. It's so much. And of course tonight, this afternoon, whatever 4:30 is, we're doing the Fitzcast on our YouTube channel. But me and my crew from the PowerCat pregame podcast with quarterly guests talking about the game as it goes. Can't show the game, of course, but hopefully we can get everyone synced up and to try to watch the game together, which is going to be impossible. It's going to be a mess. That's basically my advertising pitch on it. It's going to be a train wreck. So, but we got some really cool guests. We got Michael Bishop coming in, got Nick Leckie coming in. We got James Gilbert, one of the first transfer portal guys for Chris Kleiman, coming in. And then my friend Kelly in Vegas, Kelly Stewart, will come in the fourth quarter from a bar in Nashville. Yeah, I wish we had a 7-second delay for her.
Will you have a nice little glass of bourbon next to you as you're doing your Fitzcast?
You know what? I'm usually a guy that tells everyone no drinking, we're working. All rules are off except for F-bombs with the Fitzcast. I'm confident Nick Leckie will be drinking. I've never been more confident than anything that Nick Leckie will probably have a bourbon. He might be eating wings while talking. That's on brand for Nick. I will not, because in my current health situation, if I was drinking bourbon, I would take 20 pee breaks in the middle of Fitzcast. And nobody wants that. And at some point, I'd forget to turn off my microphone when I'm in there, and it could really get interesting. Nobody wants that. No.
I mean, you could man up and put on a diaper.
Well, that I could run to the doctor's office, have a catheter put in, and maybe not even just run the line across the floor into the bathroom outside my studio.
Just put on a diaper. Just put it on.
I know. They're not as good as you think they are. They're not as effective.
Yeah, I have not tried yet. I'm getting there. It'll be soon, I'm sure.
I have a pleasure.
Yeah. All right, Fitz. Mental images for the game tonight are now planted in there. We appreciate it.
Yes.
GoPowerCat.com. Follow Fitz at Life of Fitz. This is going to be a fun one way or the other. We'll be back to talk about it next week, and then really charge right into Big 12 basketball. Here we go. Like it's go time.
One time to be covering sports in the state of Kansas.
All right. There's Tim Fitzgerald. Follow him. Go to GoPowerCat.com. Fitz, we'll talk next week.
Thank you, boys.
All right, Tommy, let's come back. We'll get into some other topics. I'm sure we'll have a little bit more to say about K-State. We'll give you our official picks in that one because it comes obviously before we pick games. What day is it? Thursday? Tomorrow. But we'll get you some predictions on the game. You'll, of course, hear it, by the way. Quick programming note, coverage from Wildcat Radio Network starts here at 2:30 today, and then we'll move Thursday Night Football over to KNSS to start at 6:30, just in case there's there almost certainly will be, of course, with a 4:45 kick. We'll get more into that in a little bit as well. It's Albracht, it's Castor. We'll be right back with more Sports Daily.
Your phone call is welcome. 869-1240. Sports Daily on 97.5 and 1240. KFH, Wichita's #1 sports radio.
All right, welcome in, everybody, back to Sports Daily as we make our way through this game day for the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Off to a great start for our bowl season. KU with the big win, K-State trying to follow suit. All I want for post-Christmas is for these two teams to be competing for a Big 12 championship next year. I think that's totally on the table. I mean, for sure. So the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Tommy, the class is introduced yesterday. It is so hard for me with Football Hall of Fames who because you like the game changes so much that you can make cases for all of these players. They get in there. Torrey Holt finally gets in. I absolutely think he's a Hall of Famer. Andre Johnson, Reggie Wayne, all three of those receivers feel like Hall of Famers to me. Fred Taylor, a running back, is in there. Devin Hester is a return man. Antonio Gates is finally in there. Dwight Freeney. There's a ton of guys, and so I would take all of them. First of all, for the most part, it's a little different than baseball. And then you look at the players who missed the cut. Anquan Bolden, Tiki Barber, London Fletcher, Eddie George, James Harrison, Robert Mathis, Steve Smith, Ricky Waters, Vince Wilfork, Hines Ward. I mean, it's a crazy list when you think about snubbing football players. Maybe I'm the only one. I have a hard time with Football Hall of Fame because I think I would take all those guys. But I don't know. I don't know how to decipher it with all the different positions that are played and the importance. Like Hines Ward is a candidate, and they may not jump off the page. But you got to remember, he probably is the best blocker at wide receiver we've ever had, right? Outside of the numbers he put up, and that matters. So I don't know. I don't know how you compare it with Pro Football Hall of Famers, but I mean, it's a loaded class. It's nice memory lane for me, and it is different to me than like baseball, where it's far more definitive in what you need to get in.
Yeah, there's not a name that you mentioned that I thought, oh man, they're not a Hall of Famer. Even the players that didn't get chosen for this year, I mean, there are big time names on that list. Guys like James Harrison, Robert Mathis, and Anquan. And I remember just the same way that you do watching those guys play. There was no player that stuck out to me in that list that I think couldn't be deserving or you could make a case for to be a Hall of Famer. It is a lot different than baseball. Baseball, you can look at the class that is up for voting, and there's a bunch of them on that list that you're like, yeah, that they're not a Hall of Famer. Like they didn't do enough. The stat line didn't really do enough. Their teams didn't really do enough. They're not Hall of Famers. It's a lot harder in football because there are so many more players on a roster and so many more players that can make major impacts for a team over the course of a career in the NFL than in Major League Baseball. So I feel like it's a lot more clear cut in baseball. It's a lot easier to look at players and say, yes, they're a Hall of Famer. No, they're not, versus the NFL where there are so many different candidates that you could make a really strong case for.
I agree. And it's going to get harder too, because the numbers for, well, you know what's interesting about wide receiver? You think that the numbers are going to go out of control because the way the league passes, but the league also spreads the ball around more now than it ever has. So maybe it does even out. But when you just think about like the best receivers in the game right now, like Tyreek Hill's going to be a Hall of Famer, right? Justin Jefferson's going to be a Hall of Famer.
First ballot,
Jamar Chase is probably going to be a Hall of Famer. But you go down even further, like Mike Evans is a Hall of Famer, right? So it will be an interesting exercise to see the Hall of Fame evolve a little bit with some of the offensive players over the years. But that class was announced. It's big. You can go check it out. I'm glad Torrey Holt's in there. I think Torrey Holt's Hall of Famer. Other just like little nuggets there. You mentioned the USC situation. I think this is curious. So what happened last night is Miller Moss, a redshirt sophomore, set a Holiday Bowl record with 6 touchdowns against Louisville last night. Now, Holiday Bowls traditionally score tons and tons of points. You've got people calling him the heir apparent and all these things. What does that mean for Will Howard, though, do you think? Where we still haven't seen that announcement?
Well, we mentioned it in hour number 1. I think part of the reason why we've not gotten an official announcement, is that I wouldn't be shocked if Will Howard wanted to see how this bowl game played out with Miller Moss as the starting quarterback in the bowl game. And I don't blame Will Howard. I mean, if he's looking at trying to find a new program where he can go in and make an impact, that's been our big sticking point. This entire process for Howard has been, what program will he be able to establish himself, be on the national stage, build his NFL draft potential, and, and then obviously make quite a bit of money in NIL. It seemed like USC was a really good fit, knowing that Caleb Williams is gone and knowing that they had the incoming freshman transfer out. But now that you've got Miller Moss, and I don't know if you can take a 1-game sample into effect and say that he is the heir apparent after one bowl game, but man, like, it certainly does make it a lot more convoluted after that performance last night.
I'm going to read you a quote from Lincoln Riley after the game. This is according to Ryan Kartji, who's a beat writer for the LA Times. Asked if Miller Moss won the quarterback job next season with that performance, Lincoln Riley says, shoot, he may have scared off anyone that would want to come here anyway. That's a direct quote from Lincoln Riley.
Well, there you go.
I don't think Will Howard's going to go to USC.
Well,
so there's
and
a
really,
lot of chatter that he's going to Ohio State now. Like, right. I think that initial report, I don't know where that came from, and we cautioned you when it came. And it did come from a place that follows all this stuff closely.
Yeah.
It wasn't some Joe Schmo. It was a basically, I think, a blog that follows all these things. I don't know that he's going there. And it's until we see it from Will Howard, I think we just have to go grain of salt on everything. Maybe Ohio State is the spot now, as people are talking about, which would be just fine for Will Howard, obviously. I did hope he would end up with Lincoln Riley, but I don't think that's going to happen now. Will Howard can't go there.
And remember, it wasn't just about the fit for Will Howard. It was also the fit for Lincoln Riley in the situation that Riley is in at USC. An established quarterback to come in to succeed Caleb Williams, where a lot of people, have believed, and I'm one of them, that Lincoln Riley has underperformed in his time with the Trojans, and needing a really high-powered quarterback to come in. And I think that was part of the speculation as to why the young guy transferred out of USC and isn't going to stay with the program. So it was a fit for Will Howard at the time. It seemed like a fit for Lincoln Riley at the time. I don't know. It's going to be really interesting if it does end up being Moss next season for USC. If this one game is just a fluke, in a bowl game against a Louisville team, or if he is the guy that can be Caleb Williams, who is the most touted quarterback in the class this year. He couldn't get it done at USC, and I'd never heard of Miller Moss before last night. So, man, that's definitely a roll of the dice, I think, for Lincoln Riley. Not that Moss can't get it done. The guy threw for 6 touchdowns last night, but that's going to make things really intriguing for USC next season.
Caleb Williams definitely, didn't. He was still pretty good all year. Like, the loss against Washington, right? He completed 77% of his passes, had 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks. He threw 1 interception over his last 5 games. Like, I think he had the bad game against Notre Dame, and then everybody wrote him off, but he was never really that bad again after that. So a couple of, it's interesting, the perception with USC. Caleb Williams was fine. He had 30 touchdown passes, Tommy, this year, and 5 interceptions, and completed almost 70% of his passes. He was good. I don't know that my opinion on him has changed all that much. USC couldn't play a lick of defense. That wears on you. Lincoln Riley, too, underperforming, because I think I agree, but they finished 11-3 last year. They finished 8-5 this year. This was a year where the Pac-12 was really, really good. I think underperformed this year, certainly. Yeah, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that in totality. I think it's way too early, I guess, is what I'm saying. And that's not always the case after 2 years, by the way, with coaches in college. But I think with him it is, because they play, that league was brutal this year. Let me put it this way. The Pac-12 this year was better than the Big Ten this year. And so, like, him going to the Big Ten with USC doesn't really scare me. The Big Ten outside of Michigan and Ohio State is not that good. Penn State's probably pretty good. And then it's like, the Pac-12 was better this year. And so I think he'll be okay. I think it's too early to say on that. I didn't watch enough Drake May. I'm taking Caleb Williams if I'm whoever it is that ends up taking the first quarterback. It's strange to me how the perception on him has changed. And I think it started with that that Notre Dame game where he was bad. He did not play well in the Notre Dame game. He didn't ever really play poorly in any other game that he played. You know what I mean? Like he was pretty good the rest of the way. And over a course of a season, that was his only bad game. And everybody's acting like now he's not going to be what we thought he was. Everything we thought he was, to me, nothing changed that this year from what we saw.
It's because of major high expectations.
Right.
You've got an incredible prospect for the pro game in Caleb Williams. You have a high-powered coach in Lincoln Riley. You marry the two of them together, all of a sudden you've got national championship hopes and a team that is ranked and all of, teams that in the NFL that are tanking for Caleb and all of this, and they go 7-5 in the regular season. Now, the game last night capped off a disappointing season for USC. It was nice to see them get to that 8-win total and give them a little bit of momentum going into next season. But man, can you imagine if they hadn't won the game? They finished the year 7-6. They lose that highly touted prospect in Caleb Williams moving forward. There are questions, I think, legitimately about, is Lincoln Riley the right guy to continue coaching the Trojans? And so with the win last night, with the performance that we saw from Miller Moss, sure, I do think that it gives you a little bit of optimism in the future for the program. But the one thing I do know about USC is that they're not going to be incredibly patient. So maybe in totality, he needs a little bit more time. But if it doesn't turn around next season, I think that was a reason why we were speculating Will Howard would be a good fit at USC, is that you've got a veteran quarterback who can come in and help that program along. Because if it doesn't happen next year, man, I could see USC running Lincoln Riley out of town.
Yeah, it could be next year or the year after. It hasn't been good there for a long time. So you got to compare it to. But think about this with Caleb Williams. This is interesting, and it has me thinking just as we're talking about it. I think what's happened is the quarterbacks. So last year we didn't have like a surefire can't miss type prospect, right? You had a discussion amongst a bunch of guys. So what I think is happening is like Joe Burrow's final year there at LSU is sort of become this thing that people expect out of those absolute blue chipper NFL guys, right? That's what people expect. But when you so Trevor Lawrence was probably, at least just off the top of my head, the last can't miss quarterback prospect, right? The one that we knew for a long time, kind of like Caleb Williams. Trevor Lawrence in his final year at Clemson had his worst year at Clemson, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I don't think we ever started to think about him as not this prospect the same way we are about Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams has had a better final season at USC than Trevor Lawrence did, but for some reason, and maybe this is a credit to Drake May, I don't know that part of it, but I think people have all of a sudden gone down on Caleb Williams. USC's problems this year were not because of Caleb Williams. And so I think he's just as much the blue chipper as he ever has been. I think it's a fool's errand trying to say who's a can't miss NFL prospect. I just don't know that those exist. But I guess my opinion on him has changed zero this year, good or bad. I feel exactly the same way about him now as I did to start things.
It's not a Caleb Williams question, I don't think. It's a Lincoln Riley question. That's what it has been.
No. It is when you talk about Caleb Williams questions. When you look at mock drafts and everybody's saying now like he's no longer this surefire can't miss.
No, I don't
agree
with that. I don't agree with that. I think that if anything, the program let him down a little bit this year. And there were a couple of games that he had that I know he would like to forget. But there were also some games where he balled out. Caleb Williams balled out, and there wasn't that backup with the team around him. I don't feel like the coaching was through the roof, and that's a knock on Lincoln Riley. And so I don't agree with the notion that because the team finished where they did, that all of a sudden Caleb Williams is not a viable NFL quarterback. I think he absolutely is. But again, it goes back to the conversation about it's kind of like desperation time for USC. They've got to turn it around next year because they don't have the blue chipper and Caleb Williams next year. They had him last year and they kind of squandered it.
And it wasn't his fault, is my point. It was
Right.
everything else. And so when we look at it, and I'm looking at mock drafts right now that have Drake May ahead of Caleb Williams. Drake May did not play better than Caleb Williams this year. Now, maybe people think he's a better prospect. That's fine, but he did not play better than Caleb Williams. He runs around just a little bit more, I think, but like he threw more interceptions. I think fewer touchdowns. North Carolina kind of faltered there. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. All of that as a weird side road from USC getting a massive performance and us wondering about Will Howard. Where does he go now? I got to tell you, my gut says it ain't USC. I'm just going to say, I don't think it'll be there. I think it'll be somewhere else fun and cool and exciting for us to watch. I am disappointed it won't be with Lincoln Riley, though, with his track record of getting guys to the NFL and them being good in the NFL. All right, we're over here. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. Last segment to go here on the program. More Sports Daily right after this.
$97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Pizza John's, open since 1960.
It's time to get back to the sports talk.
All right, let's do this thing. Go!
Sports Daily is on KFH.
All right, quick segment here. Let's make our predictions for tonight, Tommy. I'm gonna take the Cats. I'm gonna take a -2.5. 47.5 seems lowish to me. There's a bunch of defensive starters out in this one too, so I'm gonna take the Cats. I'm gonna take the over. What do you think?
I'm going to take Kansas State as well. I think that we're going to see Avery Johnson break out in a big way throwing the football. But the one prop that I do love, DJ Giddens, his over in the rushing yards, they're going to need to establish the run, I think, to be able to let Avery Johnson get into a rhythm. Taking on a big-time opponent, his very first big bowl game on a national stage. I think they need to establish it with DJ Giddens first. And if he can do that, then it's going to be a good night for the Wildcats.
So right now his over is at 105.5. Another interesting one, I think, is Avery Johnson touchdown, which is, even money right now for any time. It's 7-1 on the first touchdown. I love the first touchdown.
That might be a good
bet.
one. That might be a good one.
I love it. His eyes are big. That's an interesting one too. There's not a ton of player props out yet, and I don't know that there will be, quite frankly. Because I don't think that the lines makers know a whole lot about this. Maybe some more will pop in closer to the game. But yeah, that's where we're at. Again, a reminder, coverage of the Pop-Tarts Bowl here with us on KFH on the Wildcat Radio Network starts at 2:30 today. And then Thursday Night Football shifts over to KNSS at 6:30. Another local interest in Thursday Night Football tonight. Of course, all eyes on Breece Hall coming off just a massive, massive game last week. Almost had 100 yards rushing and 100 yards receiving last week. I think he had 95 of both of those. So we'll have our attention there as well. We're going to take our final break. We'll tell you what else is on the network today. Put a bow on this Thursday edition of Sports Daily when we return right after this.
Where can you get the best pizza, pasta, hoagies, and salads? Pizza John's in Derby. Since 1969, families have been dining at Pizza John's. Stop in at 208 South Baltimore Monday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m.
All right, that's it for us. Here we go. Looking forward to the end of bowl season and then end of the non-traditional bowl season. There's some good games. I shouldn't be so hard on the bowls. There's some good ones coming, but none that we're more excited about left to go other than this K-State win tonight and Avery Johnson taking over. Tommy, enjoy the game.
Yeah, I can't wait for it. Looking forward to recapping it all tomorrow. For
Tommy Castor and Max Power, I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll make football picks tomorrow. Our appreciation to Tim Fitzgerald and Chelsea Messenger. Go back and listen to those interviews for free on the Odyssey app. We'll see you with more Sports Daily tomorrow.